suddenly your peace is gone. Your mind is racing. Your heart is restless. And you can't breathe easy. But let me tell you something today. Worry is not just a habit. It's a thief. It doesn't just come to visit. It comes to take. It robs you of your joy. It steals your sleep. It weakens your faith. Worry never builds you up. It only wears you down. You may not see it in the mirror, but inside you're carrying a load you were never meant to bear. And here's the truth: worry and faith cannot live in the same room. One will eventually drive the other out. When worry walks in, it tells faith to take a back seat. But when faith rises up, worry has no choice but to leave. The problem is, we often entertain the wrong one. We feed our fears with endless what-ifs. We rehearse worst-case scenarios in our minds, and we act as though God hasn't already made a way where there seems to be no way. Worry is loud, persistent, and persuasive. It tells you that things are out of control. It tells you you're alone. It tells you you have to fix it all on your own. But faith, true faith, says, even when I don't see the answer, I trust the one who holds it. Faith whispers, I don't need to understand it all. I just need to know that God is still in control. You see, worry makes you forget who God is. It makes you forget how many times He has brought you through before. It blinds you to His past faithfulness and makes you believe that this time will be different. But it won't, because God doesn't change. He was faithful yesterday, and He'll be faithful today. What makes you think He'll fail you now? Some of you are listening and your mind is full of deadlines, disappointments, heartbreak, uncertainty. You're trying to hold it all together, smiling on the outside, but breaking down on the inside. And I'm here to tell you, stop carrying what God never asked you to carry. Let it go. Let God take it. Lay it down at His feet and don't pick it up again. Worry will try to convince you that letting go means you're irresponsible, that handing it over to God means you've given up. But in the kingdom of heaven, surrender is strength. Giving it to God isn't weakness, it's wisdom. You're not supposed to carry everything. That's why Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Not stress, not more confusion. Rest. You were never created to be your own savior. Worry often starts with something small, a concern, a doubt, a delay. But left unchecked, it grows, it spreads. And before you know it, your thoughts are spinning, your heart is heavy, and your faith feels distant. That's why it's so important to deal with it early. Don't wait until you're overwhelmed. Don't wait until you're out of breath. The moment worry shows up, remind it who your God is. Remind it that you serve the one who opened the Red Sea, the one who shut the mouths of lions, the one who raised the dead. And if He did it then, He can do it again. Faith isn't pretending the problems don't exist. It's choosing to believe that God is bigger than the problem. It's looking at the storm and saying, you won't drown me because I know who's in the boat with me. Worry says, what if I don't make it? Faith says, even if I don't know the way, I know the one who does. And when you begin to speak that over your life, when you start standing on that truth, something begins to shift in your soul. You stop pacing the floor and start resting in His promises. And the more you practice that kind of trust, the quieter worry becomes. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it loses its grip. Because now, your mind isn't focused on the problem. It's focused on the provider. Your eyes are no longer fixed on the mountain. They're fixed on the one who moves mountains. That's how you free your mind. Not by fighting worry, but by feeding your faith. You don't have to live with a heart full of fear. You don't have to carry what was never yours to carry. You don't have to try and fix everything alone. There is a better way. There is a holy exchange waiting for you, your worry for His peace, your burden for His strength, your panic for His presence. And the only thing standing in the way is your decision to trust. So today, right now, give it to God, let it go, and watch peace flood your soul like a river that never runs dry. We live in a world that tells us to hold on tight, fight harder, push longer, keep control. Never let go. It teaches us that surrender is weakness, that if we don't take care of everything ourselves, everything will fall apart. And maybe that's how you've been living, doing all you can to stay strong, to keep it together, to keep moving even when your soul is tired. You've been carrying burdens that no one sees, smiling through pain no one knows about, holding in tears you've been too afraid to let fall. And yet, deep inside, You hear the whisper, let it go. But how do you let go when everything feels so uncertain? How do you surrender when your heart is still breaking, when the answers haven't come, when the doors are still shut? The truth is, surrender feels like a risk, because we've been trained to believe that if we don't control it, no one will. But that's not faith. That's fear in disguise. That's not how God designed us to live. You were never meant to live with clenched fists. You were never meant to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. God didn't create you to be your own savior. That's why surrender is not failure. It's freedom. It's not giving up. It's giving over. It's saying, God, I've done all I can, and I trust you to do what I can't. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's when your breakthrough begins. See, some of us are still bound not because God hasn't moved, but because we haven't let go. We're still holding on to the hurt, still clinging to the past, still gripping that situation like our life depends on it. But you can't receive what God wants to place in your hands if your fists are already full. As long as you keep trying to control it, you'll stay stuck. As long as you keep forcing it, you'll stay frustrated. You've got to release it. You've got to trust Him with it. You've got to say, this is too big for me, but it's not too big for you. And I know that's hard. I know surrender doesn't come easy, especially when you've been hurt before, when you've been disappointed, when you've been let down by people you trusted. But God is not people. He doesn't lie. He doesn't leave. He doesn't fail. When you put your trust in Him, you're not stepping into the unknown. You're stepping into His hands. And there is no safer place. Some of you have been carrying burdens for years, burdens of guilt, shame, fear, regret. And it's not because God hasn't offered to carry them. It's because you've been afraid to hand them over. You've been afraid that surrender means defeat. But it doesn't. It means peace. It means you stop fighting battles you were never meant to fight. It means you stop trying to figure out what only God can fix. You see, surrender is not the end. It's the beginning. It's the moment you finally breathe again. It's the moment your mind begins to rest. It's the moment your heart begins to heal. Because when you give it to God, you make room for Him to move. You make space for Him to speak. You invite His power into your weakness. That's when things begin to shift. Not always around you, but certainly within you. Let me tell you, there's no shame in saying, God, I can't do this anymore. That's not a failure of faith. That's the birth of it. That's when faith becomes real. That's when you finally realize that you were never alone in the first place. He's been there all along, just waiting for you to stop striving and start trusting. The world says control everything. God says surrender everything. The world says fix it. God says bring it to me. The world says worry about tomorrow. God says trust me with today. And every time you surrender, every time you lay it down, you're not losing, you're winning. You're stepping out of your limited strength and into His unlimited grace. So today, I want to ask you, what are you holding on to that God is asking you to release? What fear? What bitterness? What pain? What plan? What relationship? You don't have to carry it anymore. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to trust the one who does. There's a kind of freedom that only comes when you stop controlling everything and start trusting the one who holds it all together. There's a kind of peace that only comes when your hands are open and your heart is surrendered. And that kind of peace, that kind of rest is waiting for you now. All you have to do is let go. There is something powerful that happens when a worried heart chooses to pray. Something shifts, something breaks, something lifts. You may not always feel it immediately, but in the spiritual realm, every prayer is movement. Every time you bow your head, not in defeat, but in surrender, you are doing something greater than worry ever could. Worry paralyzes. Prayer mobilizes. Worry confuses. Prayer clarifies. Worry magnifies the problem. But prayer magnifies the God who's already greater than the problem. And that's where the battle really takes place, right there in the unseen place of the mind. That's where fear grows if you don't stop it. That's where anxiety creeps in and settles, twisting your thoughts, clouding your peace. You can't always stop the thoughts from coming, but you can choose what you do with them. And that's why prayer is more than a ritual. It's more than words. It's a bridge, a lifeline, a holy exchange. When your heart is anxious, your soul isn't looking for noise. It's looking for peace. And prayer is where that peace begins. It's the moment you stop talking about the problem and start handing it over to the one who already knows the answer. Because, let's be honest, worry talks too much. It repeats itself like a broken record. It plays the same scene over and over again in your mind. But prayer speaks truth. It reminds you that you're not alone, that you're not helpless, and that your situation is not hopeless. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, you can't worry and pray at the same time, because one will always silence the other. When worry fills your mouth, faith disappears from your heart. But when prayer rises from your heart, worry has no place to stay. There's something about a soul that chooses to pray even when it doesn't understand, even when it doesn't feel like it. That kind of prayer is born from trust. That kind of prayer reaches heaven. Now, let me say this prayer isn't about perfect words. It's not about a polished voice or poetic phrases. It's about being real. It's about being honest. God isn't moved by fancy speeches. He's moved by faith. He's moved by a heart that says, God, I don't know what to do, but I trust you do. He's moved by the cry that says, I can't carry this anymore. That's when heaven leans in. That's when peace begins to pour in like rain on dry ground. Sometimes we treat prayer like a last resort. We try everything else first. Worry, control, manipulation, overthinking. And when nothing works, we say, well, all I can do now is pray. But what if prayer was never meant to be your last resort, but your first response? What if the moment that panic began, you paused and said, Lord, I give this to you. You wouldn't lose sleep. You wouldn't lose your peace. You'd gain strength. You'd gain clarity. Because when you pray, you're not escaping the problem. You're aligning with the solution. Prayer doesn't always change your circumstances right away, but it changes you. It changes how you see the storm. It changes how you stand in the storm. It gives you a quiet strength that confuses the enemy. It gives you confidence in the chaos. You begin to walk not by sight, but by faith. You begin to understand that your help doesn't come from the mountain. It comes from the maker of the mountain. And there's something else I want you to know. Prayer is not just you speaking to God. It's God speaking to you. In that stillness, in that surrender, you begin to hear his voice. Not always in thunder, sometimes in a whisper, sometimes in a peace that passes all understanding, sometimes in the simple assurance, I'm with you. I'm for you. I've got this. That's when your shoulders drop. That's when your breath slows. That's when your heart stops racing. Because your spirit knows it's in God's hands now. If you've been praying and haven't seen the answer yet, don't give up. Don't stop. Keep coming. Keep knocking. Keep seeking. Prayer isn't about the clock. It's about the connection. God is not delaying to frustrate you. He's preparing something in the waiting. And sometimes he's preparing you. You see, when you pray, you don't just get what you want. You become who he wants you to be. And so today, if your heart is heavy, if your mind is restless, if your soul is weary, don't sit in silence and let worry win. Speak. Cry out. Kneel down. Lift your hands. Whisper if you must, but don't stay quiet. Heaven hears. God listens. And he answers, not always the way we expect, but always in the way that's best. Prayer is the bridge that leads you out of panic and into peace. It's the hand that reaches into your darkness and pulls you into the light. So don't carry that burden alone another minute. Lay it down. Speak it out. Let it go. And let peace come rushing in. There comes a time in every believer's life when they realize they can't control everything. And truth be told, that's one of the most freeing moments you'll ever have. But until then, we struggle. We wrestle. We try to hold every piece together as if the weight of the world depends on us. We stress over details. We panic over outcomes. We lose sleep trying to predict what tomorrow will bring. And deep down, what we're really doing is trying to hold the pen in a story God already wrote. We like to be in control because control feels safe. It gives the illusion of security. We say things like, if I can just make this work, if I can just keep them close, if I can just figure this out. And we think we're protecting ourselves. But what we're really doing is robbing ourselves of peace. The more you try to control, the more anxious you become, because life will never bend perfectly to your will, no matter how hard you try. And here's what many people discover the hard way. Peace begins where control ends. As long as you keep reaching for the steering wheel, you'll stay tense. As long as you keep trying to fix everything, you'll stay tired. There's a point when you have to let go. Not because you're giving up, but because you're making room. You're making space for God to move. You're saying, Lord, I don't want to fight you anymore. I want to follow. Too many of us are frustrated, not because God isn't working, but because we're getting in the way. We want His peace, but we also want to control the timing. We want His will, but we also want it to unfold our way. And we forget that real peace doesn't come from outcomes. It comes from obedience. It comes from trust. It comes when you look at your situation and say, even if I don't see how this ends, I know who is writing it. The letting go of control is one of the most spiritual things you'll ever do, because it takes humility. It takes faith. It takes the courage to admit, I am not God. You were never created to bear that weight. You were never designed to figure it all out. That's why you feel exhausted. That's why your heart is worn. Because you've been trying to handle divine things with human strength. But when you let go, when you release the grip, when you stop trying to force outcomes, you don't fall apart. You fall into grace. You fall into rest. You fall into a rhythm that is no longer driven by fear, but guided by trust. That's what surrender looks like. Not weakness, not passivity, but peace. A peace that doesn't make sense. A peace that guards your heart and mind even when nothing around you has changed. You see, God never asked you to control the outcome. He asked you to be faithful in the process. He never said, make it all work. He said, trust me as I work. And the truth is, many times God is waiting for us to release it before He will redeem it. As long as your hands are full of your own plans, He can't place His better one in your life. I know it's scary to let go. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes it means walking away from the plan you had in your mind for years. Sometimes it means saying, I don't know what's next, but I believe God is already there. That takes courage. But that's where transformation begins. Not when you have all the answers, but when you trust the one who does. Think about it. The most peaceful people you'll ever meet are not the ones who have it all figured out. They're not the ones with perfect lives or predictable schedules. No, the most peaceful people are the ones who have learned to trust in the middle of uncertainty. They've learned that peace isn't about having control. Peace is about knowing who's in control. And when that kind of trust takes root in your heart, everything changes. Your prayer life becomes deeper. Your worship becomes more sincere. Your faith becomes stronger, not because your circumstances got easier, but because your confidence in God grew greater. You stop needing to know how and when and simply rest in who your God is, who He has always been, and who He will continue to be. So today, if you're worn out from holding it all together, maybe it's time to loosen your grip. Maybe it's time to let go of what you've been clinging to. Maybe it's time to trust God with the parts of your life that don't make sense right now, because His hands are steady when yours are shaking. His plan is clear when yours is clouded, and His peace will find you, not when you figure it all out, but when you lay it all down. There's something deeply comforting about knowing that God never sleeps. Not for a moment, not for a second. While you're pacing the floor, staring at the ceiling, overwhelmed by the weight of it all, He is still on the throne. He isn't rattled by your storm. He's not confused by your situation. He's not up in heaven trying to piece together a solution. He already knows the end from the beginning. And while you lie awake worrying, He's already working. We live in a restless world, a world that runs on hurry, noise, and pressure. And in the middle of it all, people are breaking down, not because they don't try hard enough, but because they never rest. Their minds never slow down. Their hearts never exhale. They're running on empty and calling it strength. But God never intended for you to live that way. He never meant for you to carry that much stress in your spirit or that much anxiety in your chest. And yet so many of us do. We lie down at night, but our minds don't follow. We try to rest, but we can't shake the feeling that if we stop, something will fall apart. So we rehearse conversations, reanalyze decisions, replay regrets. And before we know it, another night passes with no peace. Another morning comes with no rest. And slowly our bodies wear down, our hearts grow heavy, and our faith feels distant. But hear me now. God didn't design you to carry everything on your shoulders. He said, Cast your cares upon me, for I care for you. That wasn't just a suggestion. That was an invitation to peace, an invitation to rest. He never asked you to solve everything, fix everyone, or understand every mystery. He simply asked you to trust him and to rest in that trust. And I know rest doesn't come easy when your heart is troubled. I know it's hard to close your eyes when the burden feels too big. But that's exactly why you need to remember this truth. God is awake, so you don't have to be. God is watching, so you can lie down in peace. He's holding the world together. He doesn't need your help to hold your little piece of it. He's not asking you to be the answer. He's asking you to believe that he is. There is something holy about rest, something sacred, because rest is an act of faith. Rest says, God, I trust you enough to stop striving. I trust you enough to silence the noise. I trust you enough to sleep tonight. Rest is not laziness. It's worship. It's the declaration of a heart that believes God is who he says he is. Think about it. Even in creation, God gave us the Sabbath, not because he needed a break, but because we do. We need the stillness. We need the pause, not just to recharge our bodies, but to realign our souls, to remind ourselves that we are not slaves to worry. We are not driven by fear. We are led by peace. Some of you have been holding on too tightly, trying to control outcomes, trying to carry the weight of what ifs, trying to force doors open that God has not unlocked. But when you choose to rest, you're saying, God, I believe you're handling it even when I'm not watching. That kind of faith is powerful. That kind of trust silences the enemy, because the enemy thrives on your restlessness. He wants you tired, anxious, distracted, because tired people make fearful decisions. Rested people walk in discernment. So if the enemy can keep you worried, he can keep you weak. But when you rest in the arms of God, you take away his power. You take away the foothold. You walk in strength that doesn't come from caffeine or adrenaline, but from confidence. Confidence that your life is in the hands of the one who neither sleeps nor slumbers. Maybe you've been trying to earn peace. Maybe you've been thinking, once I figure this out, once this problem is solved, once that person changes, then I'll rest. But peace doesn't work like that. Peace isn't earned. Peace is received. It's a gift. And it comes when you stop striving and start trusting. It comes when you believe deep in your soul that God is enough and that he is near. So tonight, when the thoughts come, when the fear creeps in, when the silence gets loud, don't reach for the weight again. Don't pick it back up. Don't go back into that cycle. Instead, speak the truth. God is awake. He's in control. I can rest. Say it out loud if you need to. Declare it over your home, over your children, over your future. Because when you rest in God, you're not being irresponsible. You're being obedient. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to carry it all. Lay it down. Turn off the noise. Close your eyes. And let peace do what worry never could. Let God handle what your hands were never meant to carry. Let his presence fill the space where your fear used to live. And tonight rest. When you truly give something to God, when you take your hands off and let him take over, something shifts not just in your circumstances, but in your mindset. The weight lifts, the panic quiets, the endless questions lose their power. Because trusting God doesn't just change the outcome, it changes you. It begins with a decision, a quiet, determined choice to stop letting your thoughts control your life and start letting your faith lead the way. See, the mind is a battlefield. It's where the enemy plants doubt, fear, discouragement, and confusion. And the longer you entertain those thoughts, the deeper they take root. But when you give it to God, really give it without strings attached, you're telling your mind that it no longer gets to run the show. You're choosing peace over panic, trust over turmoil, surrender over struggle. And that choice begins to change how you see everything. You stop asking, what if it all goes wrong? And you start saying, even if it does, I know God is still with me. That shift is powerful. It's the difference between a restless night and a peaceful one. It's the difference between anxiety that overwhelms and peace that sustains. That kind of mindset doesn't come from pretending everything is okay. It comes from anchoring your soul in the one who holds it all together. Some of you have been living with a mind full of fear for far too long. You replay the same worry, the same conversation, the same failure, over and over again. You walk through life with a tight chest and a heavy heart, thinking, If I can just figure this out, if I can just get through this week, if I can just fix this one thing. And what you don't realize is that your mind is holding you hostage. You're surviving, not living. You're existing, not thriving. But the moment you trust God with the things you cannot control, your mind begins to breathe again. You're no longer clenching to the edge. You're resting in His arms. You stop trying to understand everything and start resting in the peace that goes beyond understanding. And that peace, it's not based on circumstances. It's not based on everything working out the way you planned. It's based on who you trust, not what you know. You see, worry feeds off control. It thrives in minds that are obsessed with the outcome. But peace lives in surrender. Peace comes when you say, God, I trust you more than I trust myself. I trust you more than my plans. I trust you more than my fears. And when that becomes more than words, when it becomes a mindset, you walk differently. You talk with differently. You no longer wake up in dread because you know you're not facing the day alone. You no longer fear the unknown because you trust the one who knows. You no longer shrink under pressure because you know where your help comes from. That's what trusting God does. It doesn't just protect your heart, it frees your mind. And don't misunderstand, trust doesn't mean you stop thinking. It means you stop obsessing. It means you let your thoughts be guided by truth, not driven by fear. It means you renew your mind daily with the promises of God instead of rehearsing worst-case scenarios. It means when fear knocks on the door, faith answers. It means when your thoughts start spiraling, you don't spiral with them. You take them captive and bring them back to peace. And the beauty is, the more you practice that, the more natural it becomes. You don't have to live your life mentally exhausted. You don't have to keep fighting battles in your head that God already won in His Word. There is a way to live with a calm mind and a strong spirit. There is a way to walk through the fire and not be consumed. But it starts when you stop feeding the fear and start feeding your faith. So the question is, what are you allowing your mind to dwell on? What thoughts are shaping your day, your decisions, your direction? Are you constantly thinking about the problem? Or are you constantly reminding yourself of the provider? Because the more you think about who God is, the less you'll be controlled by what you're facing. The more you focus on His promises, the less space there is for panic. The more you fill your mind with truth, the quieter the lies become. You've spent enough time trying to be strong on your own. Enough time carrying thoughts that weigh you down. Now is the time to say no more. Now is the time to give it fully to God. Not halfway, not conditionally, but completely. And free your mind from the burden. Because when you finally release it, when you finally let God do what only He can do, peace will come in like a river. And your mind, once full of fear, will finally be filled with rest.